Retcons are always a fun time. Sometimes they're for the better, revising a storyline that fans and critics alike didn't think was up to par with the quality of the publisher's other work. Sometimes retcons are used to fix a problematic storyline that messes with the continuity of what's canon, and other times they just seem absurd, questionable, and downright scary in terms of what they do to our favorite characters. So today we are taking a look at the latter with our list of the top 10 scariest Marvel retcons. Some are very obvious retcons while others are a little bit more subtle. All of them are absurd in one way or another though. They're scary, they're unsettling, and they also make us want to crawl inside of our skin and never see the light of day again. Well, not all of them, but a few of them will definitely hurt your soul. So with that in mind, let's get to it. And at number 10, Zorn was Magneto all along. But he was also Zorn again. In 2001, Marvel brought in Grant Morrison to reinvent the X-Men, and amongst the many new aspects he introduced, he also introduced a highly controversial character named Zorn. Why was Zorn controversial? Well, initially he was a Chinese mutant who wore a skull mask that found his way out of prison and into Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, where he worked as a teacher. At the end of Morrison's run, he revealed that Zorn was in fact Magneto all along, who prior was presumed to have been dead. Zornito, as I will call him for the rest of this list, went on a massacre in New York and ended up getting into a full-on brawl with the X-Men and was killed off again, all as some beaten-to-death metaphor to symbolize the end of an era. After Morrison left, Marvel retconned the storyline, revealing that this Zornito was actually just a Magneto imposter himself, and that the real Magneto was alive and innocent. Eventually, they introduced a second Zorn, who was a twin to the original Zorn, and instead of having a star where his head should be, hence the mask, he had a black hole where his head should be. Look, they're different. And to make matters worse, there was no actual connection between Zorn and Magneto for any of this to be justified. It's noted in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, X-Men 2005, that this happened all thanks to Scarlet Witch meddling with reality prior to the House of M event. Confused? Yeah, most people still are when it comes to this retcon too. What did Magneto ever do to get dragged into this crap? And at number 9, Puck's Constant Pain. Puck is a character who was first introduced into Marvel Comics back in 1983's Alpha Flight issue 1. He's a 3'6" superhero named Eugene Judd, who initially, when created, had no superpowers at all. He was just exceptionally acrobatic and incredibly skilled at combat, and was always armed with a good sense of humor. To make things more interesting though, the character suffered from constant pain thanks to a condition called achondroplasia, which often is correlated with dwarfism. But as time went on, Puck's origins were retconned, and when Bill Mantlo took over Alpha Flight, he decided to give a new meaning to Puck's aching. The retcon made it so that his small stature was due to a mystical influence. Puck once upon a time was 7 feet tall according to this retcon, an adventurer who stumbled upon something called the Black Blade of Baghdad, which contained the spirit of an evil sorcerer named Razar. Judd accidentally freed him, but trapped him using some sort of ancient mysticism, which basically put Razar inside of his own body, trapped for an eternity, causing him non-stop pain that eventually caused him to shrink down physically, but also made him immortal. So, he went from regular guy to someone walking around as a living prison for a mystical evil sorcerer. Yeah, that seems like it makes the most sense, doesn't it? And at number 8, Scarlet Witch's kids. I feel like the only sacred thing when it comes to Wanda Maximoff's family life is that she is a twin and that her brother is Quicksilver. Seriously, don't even get us started on the whole Magneto isn't actually her father debacle. So let's try to not make this confusing. Wanda, aka Scarlet Witch, once upon a time had twin sons named Wiccan and Speed. They became members of the Young Avengers. Vision was their father. Yes, he's a robot, but we'll get to that in a moment. So Wanda believed she had these two children with Vision until it was revealed that they were actually created by her reality warping abilities. Makes sense, cause you know, Vision is a robot. Anywho, it just gets worse from there. Wiccan and Speed are apparently made from 2 pieces of Mephisto's soul, who then tried to reabsorb those pieces, which then reincarnated Wiccan and Speed into Billy Kaplan and Thomas Shepard. The whole thing is just very, very confusing. Moral of the story? Hide your kids? And at number 7, Jean Grey was never Phoenix. The Phoenix Saga, and Jean Grey by association, is perhaps one of the most iconic and recognized X-Men stories to date, and according to this retcon, it's also pretty meaningless. You all likely know the story. Jean is possessed by the Phoenix Force, a powerful cosmic entity that consumes her and ends up getting a bunch of people killed, including herself. By the end of this year, there will officially be 2 live-action movies that have followed that storyline. After Scott attempted to move on by shacking up with the literal clone of Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor, it was revealed that, surprise, Jean was actually alive. The Phoenix Force had apparently preserved her body in an underwater cocoon, but then it turned out that she wasn't the Phoenix at all. And then Jean just kept dying and coming back and dying and coming back, and who knows what's what anymore. So yeah, Jean's big sacrifice in killing herself in order to prevent the Dark Phoenix from destroying the entire universe is kind of pointless. Sorry guys. Some serious nihilism going on over at Marvel, I suppose. They just keep wanting to end the universe and then like, psych, it's not gonna end, but I guess, you know, that's comics. And at number 6, the Spider God. What's one way to piss fans off? Retcon an origin story that's over half a century old, and toss in a terrifyingly large and powerful spider into the mix while you're at it. Obviously, we are talking about Spider-Man here. In the controversial Spider-Man The Other story arc, it's revealed that Peter Parker was actually chosen by a spider god to become the web-slinging hero, which, yes, in case you're wondering, makes zero sense. Thanks to J. Michael Straczynski, the Spider God, a totemic god, quietly manipulated Peter's actions and went on to give him new powers as well, which allowed him to communicate with arthropods, have a poisonous bite, and, get this, wrist stingers. Best part was, this was never mentioned again, ever. Fans hated it, and it's also one of the reasons that our next retcon on our list was brought into the fray. And at number 5, Spider-Man One More Day. Yet another wonderful retcon thanks to J. Michael Straczynski here, and Joe Quesada. So the One Day More story arc is the famous controversial story arc in which after Peter's identity is revealed publicly, Aunt May ends up getting fatally injured. In order to save her, Peter strikes up a deal with Mephisto, one of Marvel's best narrative tools when it comes to retcons, who agrees to let Aunt May live if Peter gives up his life with Mary Jane Watson. Peter does it, dissolving their marriage. It's the product of that lame cliche that superheroes don't deserve to be happily married. Anywho, the decision cost Peter his future daughter, who he got a glimpse of throughout. But it reset a lot of aspects of Parker's life, and involved a terrifying demon in order to do so. It's stupid and scary. And at number 4, Sentry. Sentry's story is a little terrifying. Sentry's story starts off with the alias of the character, a man named Robert, remembering that he was once a superhero. He realizes that no one else remembers him being an active superhero, and the deeper the narrative dives, the more we learn about this life that Robert, aka Sentry, had in the Marvel Universe. Turns out, Sentry has an evil other half living within him. That, with the scope of the powers that he has, was a supreme threat to the Marvel Universe. So Sentry, with the help of Reed Richards, ended up having everyone on Earth's memory of him erased, including his own. Essentially, his whole story was a massive retcon in order to introduce a character and squeeze him into previous storylines that had already existed in Marvel's history. It's one of the less painful retcons on this list, since it is doing something interesting with the narrative, but perhaps the scariest part of Sentry's entire story is how horrifying his other half, Void, truly is, and why he would go to those lengths to forever suppress him. And at number 3, Karen Page. Are you guys familiar with women in refrigerators? It was a website started back in 1999 by author Gail Simone that highlighted all of the ways that female characters had been mistreated in comics. It had become a trope. The female characters were often used to progress a male character's narrative, and were subject to brutal murders, intense injuries, rape, or were just flat out depowered. Anywho, the exact concept can be applied to this ridiculous retcon surrounding Daredevil's lady pal Karen Page. Karen was given some pretty crappy treatment. She was made into a prostitute, was given AIDS, which turns out was all an illusion thanks to Mysterio, and then died in Matt Murdock's arms after Bullseye killed her. All in all, Karen was retconned from a character who went to California and began a successful acting career to a character who became addicted to heroin and starred in pornos. From Daredevil issue 227 onwards, it just gets worse and worse for Karen. Poor girl. And at number 2, Hydra Cap. Hydra Cap is the most recent retcon on this list. So in 2017, there was a series called Captain America Steve Rogers that set the foundation for some major reveals concerning Steve Rogers' origin story. We learned that he had been a sleeper agent all along for Hydra, and was basically a Nazi who stood against everything the character ever stood for. It was ludicrous. He ends up starting this whole war with him working with Hydra for global dominance, and it's later revealed that it wasn't actually Steve Rogers. Instead, the culprit behind this was an alternate timeline Hydra duplicate of Rogers. But considering the political climate that the series was released during, needless to say, making the epitome of American patriotism a fascist was a little on the nose there, Marvel. And finally, in at number 1, Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn got it on. This one is actually really terrible. It seems like poor Peter Parker gets the worst of the retcons, doesn't he? Or maybe they're just all penned by J. Michael Straczynski and that's why they all suck. Might be that. This retcon in the story arc since past added a lot of unnecessary details and motivation behind the events of the famous 1973 The Amazing Spider-Man, the night Gwen Stacy died storyline. After a pair of twins attack Spider-Man, Peter later finds out that they're actually Gwen Stacy's children, who are out to kill Peter for revenge. MJ would break the news to Peter, telling her that Stacy had confided in her. Stacy slept with Norman Osborn and gave birth to his twin children in France shortly before she died. The reason why Osborn went after her that night was because she was a threat to his potential heirs, because she wanted to raise his children with Peter instead. He was going after both Peter and Gwen that night. Still, the panels in which we see Osborn get freaky with Gwen are, well, not great. They kind of burn themselves into your retinas. Sorry, I am so sorry. Alright, there we have it, friends. Which retcons from Marvel do you hate the most? Let us know in those comments below, and tell us about some other ones that we didn't include on this list either. In the meantime though, if you dug this video, hit that like button, subscribe to Top 10 Nerd for more lists just like this, and hey, thank you for watching. We appreciate the love. Thanks for watching, friends. I'll catch you all in the next one.